we are back with the next episode of the Business Not As Usual podcast, number 11, if you can believe it. And we have a brand new video component to this. So we are not only releasing this on podcasts, we're releasing this on video on YouTube. So whether you joined us in the audio world or the video world, welcome to the Business Not As Usual podcast. I am Vince, and with me as always, for the first time that we can see, Michael Martino.
Hey-o.
Hey-o. What's going on, buddy?
I'm all discombobulated with the video.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about it for 10 episodes.
We have.
And we finally, like you know what? I'll be honest. I have been very lax in all of my travels. I never promote anything. And so I realized that, I make a lot of videos, but I don't actually promote the fact that I have a YouTube channel. So I'm going to do a lot more. I've doubled my subscribers from 2 to 4 in the past week.
Fantastic.
And so,
but now we have to do our hair.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I got a ring
makeup.
I got a ring light. It's like,
you see what I'm saying? It's just more stuff. It gets added.
You know what? But that's that's good, right? Like, don't you want to make sure you have everything that you need and that you're making the right decisions, and that you're constantly poring over every single little detail and minutia constantly? Isn't that a good thing to do?
To pour over every piece of minutia?
Yeah.
Maybe if it's just you and I.
Sure.
But Vince, that was a good segue, though.
Thank you.
But if you're in a transformation, especially kind of the world we live in now where things have to go fast, the role of governance is so important.
Yes.
And usually the role of governance is not by intent, but it's usually slows down the process, slows down the transformation. And in a time where you really need transformation to help your business out, governance could be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it could also, if you get it right, could be a good thing. Because you also don't want people just going rogue and making decisions that impact the transformation, the organization, the project, the team, whatever, without some sort of ability to stop or someone to review it and give their blessing. And yes, go ahead, you may proceed. But what you don't want is to have too much of that governance, because as you said, Mike, it slows the process down. Especially in a world where agility is key. And we're seeing that now as companies transition from, the sort of, I'm at home and I can't, I'm not at home. I'm in the office and this is the way it is and this is the way it shall always be, to one that has to be a lot more agile, and people are we're having to trust them to actually do the work that we've hired them to do, which is not a bad thing. But having someone that is there to guide that is a good thing. You don't want too many chefs in the kitchen, as it were.
Yeah. So, in a transformation, it always starts off with good intentions, and everyone says the same thing.
Absolutely.
We have to push down decision making into lower parts of the organization, to the people that are closest to the work and closest to the customer, and let them make the decisions. But as you said, when you're sitting in an office, and you don't really need to do that because business is still continuing, kind of that is the first thing that goes out the window, and the layers and layers of governance are piled on, which basically grinds the transformation to a halt. As opposed to what you're seeing now, where you have people your agency needs to be able to pivot, your organization needs to pivot quickly and to be able to make decisions quickly and then get products or services out the door. So if we talk about kind of the world that we're in now, governance had many layers. And then one little decision had to go up and down the stack, as it were. So I don't think anybody got it right previously. And we're trying to wade through it now, which is a perfect time to kind of blow up governance and make it in a way that allows the right amount of scrutiny, but being able to pivot and move quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that balance has never been, no one's really got that balance.
Right. And I mean, let's be fair. Like, it's hard and it's never going to be perfect. But what you want your governance structure to do essentially is provide value to the decision-making process. So I don't want, president level, vice president level, like very, very, I don't want the most senior people in my organization making decisions on day-to-day operational things. And yet there's a lot, like there are some organizations where every decision has to go up and down. And from my experience and what I've seen sort of out in the world, the decision or the recommendation or whatever's going forward, it usually becomes a situation of broken telephone where somebody says something, this is the way we should do it, and then it starts going up the governance chain. And somewhere along the way, someone will say, well, we could do that, but let's just tweak it. Let's just do it a little different. And by the time it gets to the actual ultimate decision-making body, it's become homogenized, and it's become this, like, it misses the original intent of what the decision. And so by the time it comes back down, it's like, but we didn't want to. Well, it's been blessed from above, and so this is what they want to see. And so, you end up, and again, not a bad thing. Future people that will hire me, not a bad thing. Governance is a good thing, but what you don't want to do is have people that are so far removed from the issue making decisions that govern the issue.
But that scenario that you just brought up, Vince, calls into question what a governance committee or what a governance is there for, right?
Fair enough.
So what you had said was, by the time it goes up the chain, it becomes tweaked, and then when it comes back down to the people that brought about the idea in the first place, it's not what they said, which is what usually happens, but not the role of governance. So something should go, if something needs, and I guess we'll get into it, like what needs to go where. But let's say a decision needs to go to a certain governing body. Their role is to is to look at the options and then look at the recommended option and either approve it or not approve it. Not tweak the option, and then it's not what was sent up. Like, because as I said, the people that do the work and are closest to the problem, close to the customer, have probably done a lot of analysis. They've gone through iterations. They've gone through many different versions of what they thought the original solution was to the problem. I've come up with 3 different options, pick the one that they think is the best one to go with. So for a governing body to tweak that with none of that work is actually not what a governing body is supposed to do. Their job is to either approve or not approve. If they don't like any ideas, you don't approve it. You don't start tweaking it. I think that's what one of the issues of having too many governing bodies, and B, not being very clear about what they're supposed to be doing.
So what's the perfect number of governing bodies to have? Silent. That's a trick question, dude. There's no answer.
It's a trick question.
It's a trick question.
At Google, there's probably 1. For a bank, there's probably 8. Like it's very there's no one who's going to give you. You're not going to go to Amazon and go building a governance structure, and then you're going to get like a full blueprint of how that works. They're going to give you scenarios and probably a framework, but they won't give you need 3.
Right.
Like, it really depends on your company. But I think you need, first of all, when it comes to governance, you need some thresholds to stop what you had talked about. Stop everything going up the ladder in a large transformation where there's 100 decisions a day. You can't just go up every chain of governance. So there has to be, what is a threshold for your squads or your working groups that are building products and services? What are they allowed to approve? and no governing body will ever see that. Like those are things that are just done, and things will move on.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's built on those thresholds. I think there's a level of I guess you would call it like transformation executive that talk about things like budget, and again to a threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you would need like a sponsors committee, which is usually probably the C-suite. So I'm looking like 3 or 4 tops.
Mm-hmm.
But usually you would want most decisions made at the working level, the people that are actually doing the work.
Right.
Yeah, and then the threshold would be, does it significantly change your scope? Then it probably has to go up a level, or the money, like we need $10 million to do this. That's not a working group decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, a complete departure of what was happening, right? So I think 3 tops 4.
Okay. So I take, I mean, I'm close. I take a slightly different perspective, but just sort of as a default, and this is sort of where I start whenever I've got to think through building out or making a recommendation rather on a government structure, because that's the role that I play. You need, first of all, you need one, and whether you call it a committee or a council or the Avengers, like it doesn't matter. Like you need one in the operational area, in every operational area. So you need an IT. I think you called it a working group. Good. Let's call it a working group. So the IT working group, the finance working group, the whatever.
Services working group.
The services working group, the front end working group, the back end work, like whatever. So everyone needs their own in a day-to-day, because it's important that everybody within a business unit understands what they're doing. But then you also need those people to connect at another level. So you almost need 2 at the as a day-to-day run the business. When we get into transformations, I like to rely on the model put forward through the PMBOK, which is or project management rather, and PMI around project, portfolio, and program. And so you need a working group at the project level, making project level decisions. How are we going to run this? What is the schedule? We usually at a project level, you're given a budget. You get to define the scope that you're going to deliver as part of that budget. And then, it would go up to the next level, which is the portfolio. So typically somebody would manage a portfolio of projects that are for a specific business area. So let's pick on IT, or let's pick on operations. So in your operational unit, you've got multiple projects, and you need to have sort of one person or one faculty that's looking at all of the different projects that are operating within that one business unit to ensure that they are aligning on some stated objective. So you may need a working group at the portfolio level. You then need another one at the program level. So the program usually spans business units, right? So if you're going through a transformation, you are not doing it in your operational area. You likely have impacts from the IT area. You have impact from your legal area. You have impacts across the business, and so you need someone at that level. When you are talking about project and portfolio, those are very tactical, and so it's things to do with the project and the product that you're creating. And the product could be a physical thing, it could be a process, it could whatever. And we've covered that ad nauseum in the past. When you get into that program level, that's where it's very strategic, and that's where you're going to have your most senior people in the organization, because they are looking at the strategic value of the portfolio and the portfolio and the projects. So not so much the tactical, but the strategic. They're also typically responsible for mitigating and managing risks. As we've had with the current pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, like that decisions for, are we going to work from home? Are we going to shut down the building? Are we going to transition to a work from home model? Would not happen at the lower tactical level. Mm-hmm. It would happen at that strategic level. Now, you likely have a different working group or level of governance around risk mitigation and whatever. But so that's a way that I like to at least start. But I think to your earlier point, because I feel like I've been rambling for a little bit. It's not a one size fits all. So it's not like you can come into an organization, say as a consultant, and say on day one, you know what you need? You need 4 levels of governance, and this is what they should be. Like you can't do that. It's not a one size fits all. But from this jumping off point, you can start to tweak and refine and really customize for the culture.
Which is important. To customize for the culture, which goes back to the how many levels should you have. Like I said, if you're a digital native company like Google, Amazon, your culture is probably flat and there's not a lot of levels, and you have a lot more, the teams have a lot more authority. But if you work for, let's say, a traditional company, banks, insurance, government agencies, you're going to have more levels ladled onto that. But again, it's making it work within those. And I think it's important, as you talked about, those thresholds. I think that really stops the situation that you talked about. If you have thresholds and what goes where, and you're very strict about how things get to certain governing bodies, then you won't have this design by committee.
Right.
Which is what one of the things, and we will pull it out again, 80% of the transformations are failures. One of the problems is the governance, and the governance about design by committee, and not knowing why certain things to go to certain governance committees and why they don't, and what happens when you're supposed to actually be there. Mm-hmm. So those are important when you're talking about governance. But if we go back to why we have governance, I think you said it. It's so someone doesn't go off and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They're there to keep the guardrails of your transformational program there, so you can actually deliver.
Right.
So with best of intentions, but I think it's about the strictness of why you have those committees.
Right. And I actually like that analogy of the guardrail. Like, think about what role a guardrail plays as you drive down the highway. Right. It keeps you going towards your goal.
Right.
Because if you needed to get from Toronto to Ottawa, you could drive straight there, but the road is not straight. Right? The guardrail keeps you on the road.
Right.
You know what I mean? I really like that analogy.
Right?
Not bad.
Not bad in this new streaming world.
That could be the title of your book, The Governance Guardrails.
Look at that. You
should write that one down.
The Guardians of Governance.
Guardians of Governance.
There you go.
Patent pending. So we've got these guardrails. They keep you focused on the goal. They keep you on the road and safe. What happens when the guardrail fails?
I think this is why many transformations fail. The guardrails usually fail when thresholds aren't adhered to, the reason for committees aren't adhered to, recommendations are tweaked because as you go up committees, things get changed, broken telephone. So I think that is what happens when and then when people have that adverse reaction to governance,
Mhm.
like to me, governance has become a way to get in the way of the program.
Mhm.
I've seen it many times.
And so, and just for people that are listening, just in case, they're learning, because we learn too. You talked about thresholds. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What's a threshold?
You can have many thresholds, like the cost of something. So
Sure.
if one threshold could be, you could have your, you call them operational level governance, like your operational teams could create products or scope that are like $1 million or less. So
Sure.
anything less than that, they can do whatever they want. It's whatever they decide is the best for the customer and the business.
Right.
If they're going to do something that's $1.5 million, then they got to put together the option paper, the recommendations, and it goes up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Another one could be a threshold of risk. How much
Mm-hmm.
risk are you willing to take on? A threshold could be the timing of the program itself. Like if you want to do something, it's the most important thing, customers want it, but it's going to deviate you from your original plan by, like, let's say more than 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's something that would need to go to what you were calling your project level,
Mm-hmm.
right? Money, like those things need to go to the next level. You just can't have, as you said, working groups doing whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we decided to go another 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe the project level doesn't want that. They could, doesn't matter if the customer wants it, the business needs it. We're not deviating from scope and time.
Right.
Maybe. So those are what I mean about thresholds. And then you would have to assign each person that. But it's not if something's 500,000 and you've allotted the operational team $1 million, they don't have to do a whole options paper and then come to you and get it blessed. That's not the point of governance,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what usually happens.
Right.
It's every decision. Usually there's no thresholds, but if you have a threshold, then that starts to get like eroded. So you have to be very clear about those things.
And I find that a lot of times it's a way of deferring accountability. And I think that's the problem, right? We're dancing around it. Let's just call it.
Yes.
It's a way of saying, wasn't my call.
Yep. It's also, I mean, you've heard this before. When there's a lack of trust, there's no speed.
Yes.
And so it's also a way from higher levels of the organization. We're not saying we don't trust you, but we need these things.
Mm-hmm.
What you are saying is you don't trust people. You don't trust your work. You don't trust the working groups that you've put together to do the work. And so it needs to go to these other areas of validation.
Mm-hmm.
But which then slows down the program. But if you had trust, the velocity of the program would just increase because you've decreed that these are the things that these levels can work on.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I get into a new sort of spot, I try to the first thing I want to do is, bring the team together and come up with some sort of shared values or whatever. One that I always try to include. Well, there's a few that I always try to include. One, I always try to sneak in with inspiration from Assassin's Creed. Nothing is true. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. But anyways, I'm a bit of a nerd. But I always try to include one that speaks to intent. And you said it earlier, right? But if you assume that everyone is operating with a good intent, it allows you to go fast, so that nobody is trying to, undermine a program for personal gain, or they're trying to I don't know why. I mean, I don't know why you would think someone is trying to watch the world burn. I guess there are people like that. I don't know any of them, I don't think. But just assume good intent. Assume that when people say things, it's because they actually believe it, not because they're parroting somebody else or something they read on McKinsey or Gartner or some site. Like, they actually believe it and that they're operating with good intent. So,
but I think that's we all I mean, we're going to cross over into like some HR, but we go through great lengths of hiring the right person. The whole job description, it's like, you need to be the next coming to actually get the job. 1, 2, 3 interviews, committees, maybe a walkthrough for the day. And then you get them there and you're like, this is the person. We spent like 4 months trying to find them. And then you don't give them you don't have any trust. You don't give them any,
Right.
You don't give them the responsibility that you've said came with the job. So if we're going to spend all this time finding the right person, then you should at the working group level, let them do their thing. Because I assume you've gone through all that for everyone in that working group level.
You would think.
Let's let them do their thing.
You would
That's
think.
the point.
And that was
move out of the way.
That was a Steve Jobs thing, I think. Where he said, hire good people and get out of their way.
That's right. You need to get the hell out of the way.
Right. Because you don't want to, especially if you find that true diamond in the rough, you don't want to then micromanage. I know when I get micromanaged, it doesn't end well. Like I
don't think it ends well with anyone, because you actually discourage them from doing work. If there's no ownership, if you micromanage to the point and give them no ownership, then they have no ownership over that product.
Right. I think some people do like the structure of, micromanagement is a dirty word.
I think you've hired the wrong person to be in a transformational program.
1,000%.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm saying there are people in the world.
Oh, yes.
That
in the
crave micro to be micro. Like,
absolutely.
They love it. Now,
well, because they love the predictability and like, I'm coming here. You want me to do this? I'm going to do this. I'm happy. They get their joy. Like, I'm happy. You told me to do something. But I don't think that those are people in a transformational program. Like, those are the people you should be hiring.
I've seen people like that move into transformations.
I'm going to do this.
Well, we're on video, so you can see.
That's why I'm doing it. Oof. You're hurting my head.
Hey, no, just to go off on a tangent here for a second. No more of, if you could see the video, you'd see that I'm waving my hands all around. I'm waving my hands all around now. So somebody on another stream was like, "You're funny." Like, why am I funny? Like, your hands.
You talk with your hands.
You talk with your hands. I'm like, well, I'm Italian. What do you want? I have actually seen examples where really, really micro operational type people move into more senior roles because they're really, really good at what they do, and then by virtue of their title, get pulled into a transformation because it impacts their area. And yes, those are situations where you really have to manage the stakeholder, because they are not comfortable with the ambiguity and they need the detail and they need that micro. They're comfortable with it. But to your point, I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I think I can speak for you on this as well. Like, we have attained a level of mastery, that whole Daniel Pink mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Like, I think we've done that, where we have attained a level of mastery in our individual, our respective disciplines. And we need the autonomy to be able to execute on that. And when we're not given that, when we're not able to do that, is where, I know I start to feel antsy.
But I think a lot, if you're going to pull, again, we go back to the scenario, if you're just pulling someone into a transformational program because they're the next one or it's in their title, again, you haven't done a good job of determining who should be in the program. Like, it's not by default. You should be finding the people that are the next leaders, the people that can work on their own, not afraid to make decisions. And if it's the wrong one, then they course correct. Again, but as you said, most transformational programs, they come along and they go, okay, who do we need? Okay, we need that person because of the role, and then not because of who you're supposed to be. You're still building a new team. Yeah, like, people should think of transformational program as building a new team
Mm,
And who are the players that you need on that team?
right.
Not
I
here's
need somebody from IT. I need
right.
somebody from, yeah.
Not we have a transformational program and it's going to be a whole new way of working. So who are the people that are in the spot now?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying those aren't the right people. Like
Yeah.
you could, if a person in the spot now and they fit the mold of what you're looking for, fantastic. But it's not just because. And again, it goes back to, have you done the work to pick the right person so they can be autonomous in the program?
Right.
Which allows for those levels.
Yes. I almost feel like we've started down the path of HR, and we can maybe dovetail that in the next episode,
right?
Where we talk about how do you hire the right people to be involved in your transformation. But I think
it's all interrelated.
It's all like, if we could, and I think we made this mistake in an earlier podcast that we did. We were just like, let's just make content. When we record, it's live. That's it, done. And so
we're just going.
Yeah, so we would go through periods where, like, in a week you'd have 5 episodes, and then nothing for a while.
Right.
And that was a mistake. So we're gonna drip these out. So you're gonna have to stay tuned for HR and hiring.
And we're actually gonna plan episodes.
We're gonna plan things.
So there's like an arc to what we're talking about.
And often it just appears organically. Like, we did not say, oh, you know what the next episode should be? Hiring.
We're doing. Yes.
Yeah.
It appears like we don't know what we're doing, but we actually do.
Yeah. I mean, we are practitioners, and I think that's some of the comments that I've gotten about this podcast.
We're in the dirt, baby.
Is like, these guys are, number one, we're funny, so I'll take that.
I don't know if we're funny by design, but we're funny.
We have some we have some humorous observations.
Sure.
For whatever reason, when we talked about Prince, and people loved that.
We pulled Prince out of nowhere.
Yeah, so we got to do more of that. But people like the fact that you get stuff here that is not covered in too many other podcasts that are on a similar topic. Like, it's very theoretical. It's not very
I was going to say something, but I was kind of, I don't know. I was making it. I was going to be for it to be a joke, but it may have been like I was throwing shade, which I wasn't going to.
No, let's throw some shade. What do you got?
I wasn't going to throw shade, but it may have come across like I was throwing shade.
Is it about me?
No, it's about.
Then I don't care.
You're not going to get some of the stuff you get here. You won't get it at McKinsey.
No, and I mean,
and that's not shade, because they have very good podcasts.
It's not. I subscribe to McKinsey, like, basically their whole suite of email. Like, I get 2 or 3 emails from them a day,
and their podcasts are very good as well.
Their podcasts are good, but to me, it does skew.
You don't get
very strategic, and that's, again, you need that too, and that's what they are.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't get Prince on McKinsey.
You don't get Prince, but they're very to borrow a phrase from Gary Vee, they're very in the clouds, and we tend to skew more to the dirt, and so we can soar like eagles, and we'll do an episode on enterprise analysis where I get to talk about my new program.
Eagle. Soar like eagles, enterprise program. What? I must have missed that part.
I have been since I've gotten sort of the first couple of weeks of the quarantine has been, I was shook. Since then, I have had a level of productivity that, like, is unprecedented. In the 2 weeks since, I've built the framework for 2 new keynotes. This is totally relevant to this podcast, by the way.
Oh, it certainly is.
The framework for 2 new keynotes, 3 new multi-day programs, and I've worked on a couple book proposals because I actually want to get my next one or something in the future published by, like, a proper publisher and not just Vince Incorporated. So if there's any publishers out there that want to talk, you can. If there's any publishers out there,
If
you
want to talk.
can get me at
Want to talk?
vincentmirabelli.com. And if anybody wants to talk to Mike Martino, where can they get you, buddy?
You can get me at michaelmartino.ca or at on the IG at _ Michael Martino.
There you go. And this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast with Vince and Mike. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Later.